Hey, this is Vu, and this is going to be a beginner guide to DE Nuke. This is going to be pretty much all the stuff you need or want to know when you're trying to pick up a new map, being Nuke. Spoiler alert, it's not the best map ever, so maybe that's why you've taken so long to learn it. However, hopefully this can be a little bit of help for anybody that's trying to move on from being Dust 2 or only the good maps only, and trying to pick up some of the worst maps like Nuke or Cobble, or I'll go over a few of them there. So for Nuke, the first thing you're probably going to want to know are the callouts, which I'll have on the screen here. You can just pause the video to check that out if you want. They're nothing too overly specific on this map. There's a few things that are different in certain regions. For example, my team, we've called this control vent or far vent. You might hear it called something else in Europe, and Twinkie over here is North American, at least source callout. People always called this Twinkie and source because it was big, yellow, and I guess white inside. Who knows? Anyways, the main thing you're probably wondering when you're going to a first map, and the trouble that I have more often than not, is going to be the meetup timing. So where you're going to find your opponents if you run a straight line to your spot. So there is a bit of variance on this map based on spawns. The terrorists will have a good amount of spawns dealing from way up here, right about where the bomb dropped, I think maybe a little bit further forward, and they can go all the way back to about here, I believe. So there's a decent period where they can spawn, causing quite a bit of difference in terms of how long it takes to get there, and the counter terrorists have a bit of variance as well. So it's a little bit tough to give an exact location. However, you can give an average of, if you're trying to get up into heaven and go towards hut rafters, you're probably not going to make it past here. If they're going for an upper rush, anywhere between here and here is about the furthest you can expect to get before they come out for an upper rush. And the same thing goes for Squeaky. You're probably going to get to about here-ish. Sometimes you'll not even get out to here. You'll be about here, depending. It really depends how you come up the ladder. If you come up the ladder efficiently and the first guy strafes off, rather than old manning it and going straight up, you're actually going to have a much better time making your way into your spot. But realistically, you're probably not getting all the way to your spot before you get a rush out if they're coming out hut. If they're coming out Squeaky, this Rafters player should be able to get to about here, and this will actually give you enough time for the hut player. He can come up and molly over the silo there into hut if he wants, and the Squeaky guy can pretty easily just bank a molly off of there. And you're going to see most teams, or a lot of the time, teams are going to go for these mollies, probably a little bit more efficiently than I did there, but most players are probably going to go for these mollies because it's extremely hard to deal with these pushes, especially preventing a team from getting down vents, as the timing, as I said, works out kind of against you a lot of the time. You probably want to be going for these mollies just to prevent that upper rush, which is, especially in pugs, really one of the most kind of scary things to try and deal with. It's pretty easy to get a couple kills, entries, and it's very hard to retake upper if they just get those quick entries. Towards outer, as an outer player, you're going to be able to set up easily by the time they get over to here. You'll also be able to get to about here, so you don't have to worry too much about setting up before the players get to this box over here. The one thing you should be aware of is the route to lower. So if you're coming through lower, usually what people will do is they'll break this window and open the doors. This is the Kenny S route. So you break the window, so if you're trying to rotate over and ramp has been taken, you can shoot them without, assuming you're opping when you do this, you can shoot them without having to break the window. And also this line here, if you're opping, again, you have a good line towards the lower ramp, whereas if the doors open inwards, you actually don't have that anymore. So you want to be opening the doors outwards. And unfortunately for this route, if your opponent's straight rush outer, they're going to be up around here by the time you get to about here. So if your opponents are straight rushing outer, you're actually kind of putting yourself in an awkward situation with this. You probably want to have a teammate come over. A lot of the time I'd ask the teammate to just toss a quick flash over just to delay them a little bit, or you can have them naded or something just to delay them, push them back a little bit, and then you can come up on these stairs. Typically you want to check over to Twinkie first because they can see you from Twinkie, which makes this a little bit dangerous, but still you can get these quick peeks, go for a pick here, and you can always fall back. And for outer, you can fall back to here, take a shot here, and if you take a shot here, you still have plenty of time, well, not plenty of time, but enough time to get into vents before they can come around this corner. So this is a typical way you might see an opper play towards secret here. Now, if you are opting towards outer, or rather, I should go over ramp, I guess, first. The ramp timing, it's pretty much the same as in 1.6 or Source. You're probably going to be getting to around here as they're crossing this angle. It depends on spawns a little bit. Sometimes you have a little bit of time to set up. Sometimes they're going to be right around the corner quickly. And you're just going to have to worry about that a little bit. If you come over to here, they can be kind of on top of you very quickly if you're not prepared for it. Again, on Nuke, being the way the map is played out, a lot of players will be going for this early molly, because if you throw a smoke, so imagine there's a smoke down here, it's pretty easy for the terrorists to bomb through it with 5 people, maybe with a flash off of this bounced or banked wall there, and just bomb straight on top of you. And it sometimes can be pretty hard to find the one entry and fall off. A lot of the time you're going to get stuck in an area like this and not be able to get down ramp quite quickly enough. So a lot of people will start with a molly there. As for a setup on Nuke, the unfortunate thing about Nuke, especially when you're looking at matchmaking or pugs, is that it's a heavily rotation-based map. So typically teams will play 2 towards upper, 1 outer, 1 rotator, and 1 towards ramp. Now, what happens is if your opponents are going heavy towards ramp, you realistically can't really hold it. The best you can do is hope that this ramp player can find an entry. So he can play a spot like this, or play on top of this box, or a lot of people play this headshot angle. I'm not a huge fan of it because it's so common, it gets pre-fired now, but you can play here. Someone can get boosted up here. You sit crouched down on the little box so they can't spot you easily. This isn't really a one and done spot. This is it, or a spot fall off spot. This is really just a kind of frag out spot, but you can play a variety of different spots where you try and get an advantage and find an entry. This is another common one, and fall off. However, a lot of the time you're not going to be able to find the entry, which means you're going to have to fall off and give up control without really gaining anything important. And more often than not, what happens when you're doing the rotating setup here with this player rotating between heaven, hell, and J here, he's not going to be here when the players start to pressure ramp. So he's going to rotate over, you've already fallen off, and he's kind of in an awkward spot as well, unless you're going for a hard hold or he's there as they're hitting towards ramp, which means you're going to have to give up ramp. This player here has a couple of options. He can either go inside of these windows. A decent place to play this kind of an off angle is here. People have started to check this a decent amount, but it's still not super common. Or you can just come back here and play fairly safe and try and hold on to control side. Realistically, when you're playing lower, teams will leave one player here a lot of the time and maybe one on a quick rotate if their opponents have ramp, as long as they maintain outer control, because if you can hold on to control side, lower is actually not that hard to retake if you hold on to either side. So if you hold on to red door side, it's a little bit harder to retake because you have less control, but if they try and take red door and you already have control side, it's going to be extremely hard for them to actually get a bomb plant. When they get a bomb plant, it's pretty easy for you to retake. A ramp flank has a lot of success coming through here, so the rotation into lower through there works fairly well. The other rotation, you can come over to here and look towards getting into toxic side here. A lot of the time, the good thing about this spot is you can peek out towards ramp or over. I guess not over as effectively, but you can kind of peek around here, find an entry, and then quickly fall back and hide in an area where it's quite hard for them to actually deal with you. You can play behind the silos, or you can sit in one side corner. They can't spam you through here, or they can nade out the doors, but this is a good place to stay alive, especially late round when they're forced to plant, even with you in these doors. There's no real effective way to deal with you, and you can just kind of open up the doors and try and kill the planter quite quick if they try and force you out. So again, you have to fall off of ramp, which means the rotates need to shift. So if you fall off of ramp, then there needs to be a player that's watching this hell area. A lot of the time he can watch it from heaven, so your rotator can watch it from heaven or towards hell over here in this general area. You also end up needing to have your outer player kind of shift a little bit. So a lot of the time you might see an outer player. He can actually stay outer. In some of these scenarios, it really depends on the exact situation. If he's not being pressured outer, he can kind of come over and maybe support towards hell a little bit and have a player towards heaven. So you've got a little bit of a solid setup with a little bit of support for each other. And you can keep the two players upper, however, one of them needs to kind of be half rotated. A lot of the times you'll see teams have a player sitting in vent for this, or beside squeaky vent or on top of hut. These are areas where it's really easy for you to quickly rotate to lower if your lower player is starting to get pressured. The more common way for real teams to take outer is with a couple smokes. So the two smokes that I'm aware of, or that I see people throw the most often, are these ones. So first one should look a little bit like that, and this one I line up this box like this and then aim up from here to about here. So that's going to be your two cross smokes. I guess I got this one a little bit wrong. Let's try that again. So they look a little bit something like this with without the slight gap in between here, but oh well. And you'll have someone else throw a smoke like this, so you can run along this wall here, aim right about here, and throw as you're kind of passing that area. So a lot of the times you'll see a little bit more coordinated matchmake teams. You won't see this all the time, but you'll have these three smokes. And this is one of the reasons that Nuke is honestly so hated, and I don't like playing it too much, is because these three smokes basically force a very awkward rotation, putting you in not a fun spot. So this is why players will go with that secret route that I showed earlier to try and prevent this, to get something done if these spots are smoked off, and try and get a little bit of information. You'll see Kenny S do this quite often with this peek down here at the bottom of these stairs, because peek here, take a shot, fall back, peek here, take a shot, and then go in events and take a shot. But assuming you're playing a standard style, you get these three smokes off, and you're going to need to force a bit of a rotation. The uncomfortable part is that you still have to worry about these outer rafters no matter what, so you can't full rotate off of this area just because the smokes are down outer. And the smokes being down outer, a lot of teams throw that every round, so it's kind of awkward trying to deal with it. I'd say the most standard way to rotate out of this is to have this outer player rotate over to hell. So he's going to play hell, heaven, kind of outside area. Sometimes you'll have a slightly different rotation, especially if there's an entry or if they're heavily pressuring towards heaven. This opper might come back here because you can easily prevent the outer rafters play. Usually that's a free kill on this guy going outer rafters, and you can also prevent them getting into hell. If you're playing in hell, or if you're playing here, which is of course another very common spot, it can be quite hard dealing with heavy pressure because they can peek from above, they can come from the side, and they can peek below. So it is somewhat common to go CT, but not always. This player is going to play towards hell, so usually what you'll see is you still want to hold on to ramp. One of the things you need to realize here is giving up ramp and outer is kind of a pretty bad way to play it. If you've given up ramp and outer, you've given up two pivotal locations on the map that you want to hold if possible, and you've given your opponents way too much map control to actually try and hold onto the round. So as awkward as it is, even though you can't necessarily hold outer or ramp at any given time, if you give up one, you need to try and hold on to the other as much as possible. So this hell player needs to be able to support towards ramp if he's getting pressured, and this ramp guy needs to know that if ramp, or if outer is already taken, he needs to try and force control of ramp as much as possible. So As I said, a standard way to play this, you rotate the outer guy towards hell, you rotate the ramp guy a lot of the time towards lower, depending on the timing. Sometimes you want to make your rotator go down if it's possible. However, a lot of the time you want to fast rotate your ramp player, and your rotator will come back and take over ramp right afterwards. And then you've got, again, a fairly solid setup. This guy towards hell or heaven, he needs to be, of course, paying attention to outer rafters. He can be the guy that's supporting upper, because of course upper is a lot harder to hold if they can come through mini as well. And again, you want to be able to have a guy that's potentially quick rotating on top of HUD or something like this. In case they're going towards lower, you can go for a quick rotate and support. And the guy that drops lower can a lot of the time play this angle. This is a fairly common angle, or headshot over here, or you can even have the door open and you can play the headshot over the door here. So plenty of different angles you can play when you rotate to lower, but that's what makes this map very awkward for matchmaking games. It's a very rotate-based map. A lot of utility you need to use at the beginning, and because of that, it's very awkward to be playing with a matchmaking team because you don't have any of the ability to rotate, and it's going to honestly rely a lot on your team getting the first entry. So an aggressive HUT player on CT side can actually kind of ruin a T side because of the fact that the first entry is so important on a map like this, preventing your opponents from having that advantage and pressuring it. On T side, again, there's the 3 smokes you probably want to throw towards outer. I showed all 3 of them. I believe this is the smoke that was slightly off, and you can look that up. There's plenty of guides to throw this sort of smoke, and they're not too hard to throw either. That's probably your standard if you're actually trying to run a real T-side. If you're trying to run a standard matchmaking pug T-side, there's not much you can really do. That's another thing that makes Nuke such an awkward map to play in pugs and matchmaking, because there's a reason that this triple smoke is so necessary, and you see it in almost every pro game. There's, I'd say like 75% plus of pro games I see have this triple smoke on the majority of rounds, because going outer dry is very awkward. You can do it with an op. Usually if you want to do it with an op, you boost the guy up here. He can clear towards garage, clear out on top of blue, beside blue, kind of clear out the rafters, and then you can actually jump across here and then peek out from here and try and full clear garage. And you can do that without any smokes, but other than that, all of the angles in all of the areas are very awkward. So you want to try and basically base your T-side around rushing upper, in pugs at least. That works kind of like rushing outer on train works very significantly, especially if your team has the balls to not, you go, we're going to rush upper, and someone's like, I'm going to go outer, I'm going to go ramp. If your team's actually willing to do it, it's going to work a lot of the time in pugs, but all of the angles on pretty much every other area are uncomfortable, to say the least. The counter terrorists have a good advantage, and so you need to be working together, which pug matchmaking teams tend to not do. Going towards ramp, one of the other things you can do is you can have a player jump across and an opper peek inside. Again, most of this is opper stuff. An opper can get a little bit of an opening here to clear out this, and then if you do clear out that, you're going to notice that a lot of the time ramp is the weak spot on CT side. You'll find that a lot of ramp players are exploitable. They'll either play this headshot angle down here, which you should be able to see from around here, or they'll play the headshot angle on these boxes. So usually the headshot angle behind the boxes is going to be right about here, although it can be around here, I believe. And you're going to find that the ramp player is more exploitable a lot of the time than almost any other area. So you can kind of smoke that off and try and take towards ramp, and that's maybe going to be your best bet. Pretty much everywhere else, the counter terrorists have a huge advantage, and trying to force out doesn't really make much to any sense unless you're doing this type of smoke play, or maybe you're going on top of Twinkie and trying to force a frag. But again, that's one of the reasons that Nuke is probably your least played map. When you look at your pugs or matchmaking, I've had it enabled my whole time playing on ESEA in the last 5 months, and only played it, I believe, once. which can just say something about how unplayed it is. And honestly, I think for good reason. It's uncomfortable and very unfun to play in matchmaking and pugs, but hopefully this gave you a bit of an idea of how you can start out, things you need to know on this map to get a foothold and prevent yourself from kind of having that trouble of just getting wrecked on Nuke for the first few times you play it. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.